selecting the appropriate music to orchestrating seating for heads of state at a summit meeting, when it comes to the power of protocol, details shape diplomacy. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Falk, President of the World Affairs Council of Dallas-Fort Worth, and thank you so much for being with us as we welcome two chiefs of protocol who know firsthand the joy, and might I add as well, the anxiety that come with the position. Capricia Marshall joins us to discuss her new book, Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy. And she might even mention this, the book was reviewed unbelievably favorably this past Sunday in the Washington Post, well-deserved review. Capricia is going to be in conversation with Beth Huddleston. What you may not know is that Beth is the Executive Vice President of the World Affairs Council, as well as having served as Chief of Protocol in the city of Dallas for quite a long time, since 2003. Let me remind all of you, if you're new to watching our program, that you can order a copy of the book, Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy, from interabangbooks.com. That's Dallas's locally independent bookstore. And if you type in the code dfwworld, you'll get 10% off, not just on Protocol, but on any books that happen to be in your shopping cart. I want to give particular thanks and recognition to one of our directors at the World Affairs Council. That's Maisie Hyken. Maisie, thank you for supporting today's program. And promotional partners, the World Affairs Councils of America, the Georgetown Alumni Club of DFW, and DFW Purdue Alumni Club. That's hints about where these ladies receive their degrees. Let me remind you that you can always go to our website, dfwworld.org, to see our most up-to-date calendar. And if you've missed a program or would like to share a program with someone else, just go to our YouTube site, our YouTube channel at DFW World. Beth, who will be moderating the conversation, will be looking at your questions, so be sure to enter them, and I know that she will get to just as many of them as she can. Capricia Marshall served as United States Chief of Protocol in the Obama administration from 2009 to 2013. Prior to that, she was Social Secretary for both President Clinton and the First Lady, Hillary Clinton. Today, she is the President of Global Engagement Strategies, and she also is a fellow at the Ambassador in Residence, rather, at the Atlantic Council. And as I mentioned, I've known Beth for a long time and have watched her maneuver through some of the protocol issues. So I know that we're going to have just a wonderful conversation. So with that, Beth, the mic is yours. I look forward to sitting back and listening.
Thank you so much, Jim. And I just want to commend you on your leadership during these very challenging times. The Council has survived many crises over the years, and I'm just so humbled to be a part of an organization that has taken the reins and pivoted into a new direction with these Zoomcasts and wonderful authors and world leaders that we are able to bring to you, the audience. When I first learned that Capricia Marshall had written a book on protocol, I was absolutely blown away and so honored that I was asked to be the moderator for it. Capricia is truly a rock star in the world of protocol. She was a very young social secretary and maneuvered that world graciously in the Clinton administration, and then was chief of protocol for the Obama administration. And one of the things about protocol that's so very important is the behind the scenes, what goes on behind the scenes. And I would just like to thank all of the people that have made this possible, particularly Rachel and Kirsten and Catherine. And we had a wonderful intern, Morgan Henley, who helped write the briefing book for this. So it really takes so many people to make an event like this possible. But Capricia, I am just so thrilled that I'm having the opportunity to visit with you. And I just wanted to set the stage and kind of go big picture on this. What does protocol and its role in diplomacy? We hear the word protocol bantered around quite a bit. Some people even will use it as a verb. We'll protocol this, but the word protocol is used in quite different ways. What specifically does protocol and its role in diplomacy mean to you?
Well, first, let me say this, Beth, that it is such a pleasure to be talking to a fellow chief and to engage in this conversation with someone who gets it, so very, very well from the front lines. I also want to thank the World Affairs Council of Dallas-Fort Worth and Jim in particular for extending this invitation to me, as well to all those wonderful people who helped put this together and everyone who is joining us today. So you know well, protocol. It is something that most people are very unfamiliar with. They know that there's this word and this concept, but they're just not quite sure what it exactly does or what I exactly did in the position at working at the State Department. I like to say that protocol creates a foundation for diplomacy. It actually starts the wheels of diplomacy, if you will, for every engagement that the president had, big or small, with his counterparts around the world. We were essential. Before the president stepped into a room, before he picked up a pen, we had reviewed, analyzed, implemented every opportunity that we could to make sure that that environment was set so that diplomacy could take place. But in addition, also, you know, all of us come to these negotiations, to the bilateral conversation with an intention to make sure that our leader is given that advantage. And so I worked really hard with our team on making sure that President Obama, Vice President Biden, or Secretary Clinton had approached their counterparts in these negotiations and really tough discussions with as many tools in their favor and the pivoting of the power in the direction of the United States.
Well, that is an excellent overview. And I read your book cover to cover and found so many fascinating stories that we won't be able to get to all of them. But something really caught my eye on the book cover. You have endorsements from, of course, Hillary Clinton, Henry Kissinger, but one that really caught my eye was Whoopi Goldberg. And her words were about the importance of protocol, not just in our times of racial tension, but in times of nationalities conflicting with one another. And I was just wondering, first of all, your relationship with Whoopi and what her endorsement meant to you.
Well, my time with Whoopi has gone back quite a bit. When I served as social secretary, as you noted, for the Clintons, I had the opportunity to get to know her in a variety of capacities. And then they actually allowed me to guest host on The View once. And you know, we just have had great exchanges over the years. And so when I reached out to her, she said, send me the galleys. She read the galleys, actually. And she said, you know what, we just really need more of this type of thinking. We need ways in which how we can communicate with one another better. And frankly, Beth, that's why I wrote the book. You know, but my last day in the Oval Office was, I mean, horrible. I was so sad. I was really sad to be leaving my post. I mean, as you know well, these positions are fantastic. They're wonderful, privileged positions. And I was sad about leaving this post and sobbed all over for President Obama's jacket with my son, my 13-year-old son, looking on. But the next day, when I just started engaging with you know, business folks, because I did want to stay connected with the business community, even though I was pulling back my duties, with individuals, friends, what I realized is, boy, people are having a tough time making those critical connections in their life, those connections, those relationships that will matter in achieving, whether it's signing a new client or whether it is just making a new relationship, joining a new network of people. They had a hard time navigating in this. That's what I did in my position, you know, literally as social secretary, and then thereafter, in particularly as chief of protocol, was developing these important relationships at the very highest levels for the president, secretary of state, and the like. And Whoopi got that. she got that we need to understand each other better. We need to be engaging in these discussions with one another, to learn more from one another, that our cultural IQ is off. And, you know, I talk a little bit about presets, you know, how we come to a discussion with some of our own ideas preset in us, in that, you know, from our background growing up, our religion, our economic status, our education, certainly our family, all of that helps us develop these presets in our lives. You have to be open to changing those, expanding them, shifting them around a little bit. And I talk quite a bit about how we can make those critical connections if we understand our presets and are open and willing to change them, to you know, adjust them so that we become more open to the differences of others, not just around the world, but certainly here in our own country as well.
And you mentioned that you have a son, and obviously during your time as chief of protocol and your career, you've had to navigate between, you know, being a mother, a career woman, a wife. Do you have any advice to give the women out there? And I know that I also was surprised when you told me that most of the chiefs of protocol that you've dealt with happen to be male. Most of them in the United States at our protocol conferences are female, but how do you navigate being a woman in your position? Any tips for the women in our audience?
Oh, absolutely. So I think, let me first state this, is I believe the reason why so many of the chiefs of protocol are men are because they are selected by presidents and prime ministers who are men. And because the chief of protocol, literally, you are at the side of your leader 24/7. So the moment we hit the ground in a foreign country, I travel with the president to every single engagement he has, whether it is whether it's a dinner, whether it is a bilateral meeting, or it is a gala, summit, whatever it is, I go to every single one of those engagements. And so do my counterparts. So, you know, most of these leaders, they prefer to have a man with them. I was very grateful that President Obama chose me. But in that vein, it is, you know, there are some considerations that I had to certainly take account for, because I was a woman. There were times when I was not even so gracefully excluded from a gathering because I was a woman. In some countries, they would prefer to only have dealt with their male counterparts. And, you know, you just have to make your way into that room. I say to women all of the time, it is so important. You can't be a part of the conversation if you're not in the room. So you have to get in that room. And so I made my way and made my presence known, you know, after a bit of explanation to the host, in that I said, if this is a meeting of chiefs of protocol, then it needs to be a meeting of all chiefs of protocol. But also with that in mind, I did understand that in some countries, the status, the representation of women was a little different than, of course, it is in the United States. I wanted to know those you know, the cultural traditions, their background, why, and if my attire needed to be slightly adjusted in respect, I certainly did that. Now, but I was not going to defer my position, but I certainly was going to try to adhere best as I possibly could to the cultural customs of that country. I have a whole chapter in the back of the book called Negotiating While Female. And I wrote that because all of the tools and lessons that I discuss in the book are applicable to men and women. But I did realize that as a woman, some of those lessons and tools needed to be slightly adjusted, and, you know, how we do interact, and some of the tricks that I learned, like, for instance, when I was in the White House working for then First Lady Hillary Clinton, oftentimes I would be in a meeting, it would be myself and one other woman and 10, 12, 14 men. And I found that sometimes I wasn't heard in these meetings. And I have to say, it actually still happens today. I'll say something and no one will react. And then someone else will say something, a man, John, sitting right next to me, and suddenly everybody heard John. And I would be like, I thought I just said that. And you know, we brought this back to then First Lady, and she said, you know what, when you guys are in these meetings, just repeat what the other person has said, echo it, so that everybody in the room will then hear you. And so we started to do that. I would say, wow, did everybody hear what Susan just said? Susan, could you repeat that? And she would, and everyone would go, wow, that was a great idea. I'm not quite sure what it is about perhaps our tone, the female voice. I'm not quite sure what it is, but sometimes it does get filtered out. And so you just have to, like getting in that room, you got to make sure that that message is heard and learned.
Excellent tips. And repeating, I think that is a very good way to make sure that your voice is heard as a woman, or for anybody really, echoing and listening. And the picture that was put up, first of all, you looked fabulous in it. And I know you have a chapter on fashion diplomacy. Jackie Onassis was famous for spending a great deal of time picking out the proper outfit to go with the occasion. And in fact, I even saw an exhibit on it at the Smithsonian where they put a picture of her with what she was doing, and then they had the actual outfit there, and it was just fascinating. And I just wondered if you could share any stories about how fashion diplomacy either worked, or sometime that you had to have somebody maybe change their outfit, or maybe you had to change your outfit based on fashion diplomacy.
Yes, you know, these are fashion diplomacy, culinary diplomacy, gifts. These are all fantastic tools. They are soft power tools. They use them so often in the Office of Protocol. You know, soft power, I talk about this a bit in the book, it was a term that was coined by Joe Nye. And what he meant by that is that these are ways in which we can attract people into our way of thinking. And you can do that by, you know, being very welcoming, being very respectful. So when you do travel to another country, knowing those colors that either are revered, like if you're going to China, wearing red certainly is, or that are, or perhaps maybe symbolic of a mournful time. You know, here in the United States, brides wear white, we celebrate with white, but oftentimes white can be a color for a funeral that people wear at a funeral. And so we would be guarded to not wear an all white gown. And this actually happened when we were traveling abroad. And one of the staff people, she did not read my memo on colors, and she brought a white gown for the dinner, and I said, well, we're going to have to splash that with a lot of color. And so we all pulled out colorful pashminas and jewelry and things to sort of give it a little bit of design, so that it would not be met with a question mark over the head. What we wanted to do, of course, was to present ourselves in a very respectful way. And you use those moments to sort of tie in, to make that connective tissue, to create the bridge between you and your counterparts. Mrs. Obama was also brilliant at this, as was Mrs. Clinton when she was First Lady. They oftentimes wore gowns that were made by Americans, but of the descent of that country. Mrs. Clinton wore a gown that was made by a Chinese American, Vera Wang, for a state visit with the Chinese leader, Jiang Zemin. You just showed Mrs. Obama in the United Kingdom with Her Majesty. And that was actually one of my favorite visits ever. Oh my goodness gracious. Going to the UK at the invitation of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I think I went to Protocol, the mountains of Protocol. It was just pretty extraordinary. But they had set forth that a leader's spouse should wear a gown of white. That was one of their requirements. And I thought that was quite interesting, with gloves, not just to the wrist, but gloves that go all the way to the elbow. And so I worked very, very hard with Mrs. Obama on making sure that we were aligned with all of the expectations of Her Majesty at this type of visit. This is the highest level of visit. A state visit is the ultimate invitation.
I can only dream of having a visit from the Queen or with the Queen. That is the pinnacle of protocol. And that was a wonderful picture and gorgeous. Everybody looked perfect. And I noticed that the Queen has her purse. And you have a delightful tale about a protocol with purses that hopefully you will share with us.
Well, on that very same visit, I mean, the visit was just chock full of wonderful stories and opportunities, from the arrival to the gift exchange, and then certainly later on in the evening to the toasts, I think it was the next day, and then an exchange that I had with Her Majesty late in the evening. But on the moment that we arrive, I am the only person who is allowed to accompany the Buckingham staff. And right before Her Majesty was to lead President Obama out and Prince Philip with Mrs. Obama, I noticed that Her Majesty had her handbag on the crook of her arm. And in the United States, at the White House, it was always my custom that when a woman was holding her bag, that we would offer to say, can I hold this for you during the ceremony? And so I thought, well, perhaps because it was a gentleman standing next to me, he didn't feel comfortable. And so I turned to him and I said, oh, Her Majesty's bag. And I took a slight step forward and he said, do not touch the bag, and held me back. And I said, oh my goodness. I said, I'm so sorry. Well, I didn't. He goes, we never touch the bag. And I said, okay. And I said, well, what's in the bag? We don't know what's in the bag, but we do not touch the bag. Well, I just stood there realizing, okay, do not touch this bag. I heard later on that perhaps she carries a cell phone in there so that she can make quick calls to her grandchildren when she has an opportunity.
Wow. I love that. And it can also sometimes be a cue if somebody, you have to have a cue with your principal if they want to leave or if they want to stay a little bit longer. And so there's all kinds of hidden meanings within the purse. Yes. So something that I think we all struggle with, whether it's for Christmas or Hanukkah or with international visits, is gift giving. And I know that can be extremely tricky at times. And there can also be all kinds of snafus with it. You can either come up with the absolute perfect gift, or you can feel that a gift just didn't quite make the mark. And you have some wonderful stories in your book. And I just was wondering if maybe you had one that came to mind as a gift that presented all kinds of problems or was kind of tricky, maybe not as well received, or however you want to take that, but just gift giving as a topic.
Well, again, gifts, wonderful soft power. It says so much about who the gift giver is, that you have taken the time to really think through. And I think it was so important in the Office of Protocol for us to invest a lot of time, research into what was the background of the person that the president was going to give the gift to. Is there any connection between the United States and their country or them? Did they study here? What's the importance of the issues that they're going to be discussing? Is there some way for us to tie that in? So there was just lots of opportunities to create, again, that connective tissue to build that bridge. And so we did invest a great deal of time into the thoughts that we had to present to the President and Mrs. Obama on gifts. And as you point out, they often, I would have to say 99% of the time, we hit the mark. Then there were those that didn't quite make it, but it wasn't because the recipient wasn't pleased with it, or we just thought that you know, we could have done better. And you do hate that moment of regret. You never want to have that moment where you say, oh, I could have done better. So you just put it all in at the beginning to really research what might be that wonderful opportunity that we can use. What artisans can we bring into this? What's the creativity behind this that we then can use as a diplomatic tool? Now, there were those gifts also. Now when you exchange gifts in the United States, one problem but one issue that we had to deal with, we had to manage, was the value of gifts. So the president is limited, as everybody who works in the federal government, we're all limited at the amount of a gift that we can receive. So once it hits that amount, there are two options. One is that it goes to the GSA. We accept the gift on behalf of the president, but he does not keep that personally. Or the president, if he wishes, can actually purchase that gift. So you never leave a gift behind. And once, when we were in Tanzania, the president was given this extraordinary, I mean, just extraordinary wood carving. It was really beautiful. And so, and he commented on it. It had been given, president to president, principal to principal. And so we were trying to determine, how are we going to get this mammoth wood carving back to the United States? Well, we couldn't diplomatic pouch it. We talked to the folks at Air Force One, and they were like, no, it's not going to get into the belly of the plane. We then talked to the folks on the car plane. We talked to everybody. Finally, I did have to go and beg again the crew on Air Force One and the Secret Service, and said the only place that this carving is going to fit is topside in the conference room on the plane. And they finally relented after I explained it would be so awful for the president to leave this behind. It would be just, it would ruin the entire visit. And it probably would have, because his counterpart had gone to great lengths to select that one thing. Well, you should have seen us driving through at 7 a.m. in the morning through the streets with this huge wood carving sticking out of a pickup truck. It was quite funny. But protocol officers, you never want to leave a gift behind. You certainly want to make sure that your president is always well represented. And now it's a part of the archives, and will be on display when President Obama's library is built.
I've had this happen to me before, where I felt like maybe we were out gifted. I won't name the particular country,
yes.
But did that ever happen to you, where you felt like things shifted, the power, the negotiation shifted because of being out gifted?
Oh, Beth, you know this well. Yes. Regrettably, you have these discussions with your counterparts up front. Will this gift be given? Is there going to be a gift given? Sometimes you determine that this is not the appropriate time for there to be a gift exchange. And if it is, will it be between protocol to protocol, behind the scenes, or will this happen principal to principal in the room, or a very visible, sometimes even at a press conference? And so on one occasion, when I believe it was one of our first engagements with my Russian counterpart, and we had decided, our discussions in advance, protocol to protocol, was that the gift exchange would occur behind the scenes. Well, President Obama had just finished his bilateral with President Medvedev, and President Medvedev asked for a small bag, and there's a small bag, and out comes this gift. And I said, oh. So then President Obama looks to me for our gift, which is now back in the van and is not with me. It's in the motorcade, because also we were in a hurry, did not want to put it, you had to put it through security. We did not have the gift. And I had to say to him, sir, it got stopped up. I promise that I will have this later. Well, he gave me a look of, It was not happy, And that was my bad. always be prepared. You never quite know. And so never again did I enter a bilateral without a gift. And as a matter of fact, at our next bilateral with President Medvedev, we came with a great gift. It was a fantastic gift. And President Obama, I told him in advance, I said, now we have, and we knew that President Medvedev loved jazz and he loved collecting jazz records. So we went to a great place here in Washington, created this amazing collection for him and presented it in this beautiful box. And so when I told President Obama before the bilateral, I said, do you want to do this person to person? Do you want me to do it protocol to protocol? And he said, oh no, I'm giving this one in person. So it was a terrific moment at the end of the bilateral when he made that presentation.
It suddenly brought back a memory, maybe post-traumatic stress, but I was in a meeting once where we presented the gift. It was an Asian country where gifts are very important, and opened at the meeting, and a big box. It looked wonderful, and they opened it up and it was empty. The person had forgotten to put the gift in, but I took immediate responsibility for it. And so tell me, when things go awry, what is your rule of thumb when something doesn't go right? What's the first damage control that you do?
You know, Beth, you did the exact right thing. I mean, you were so spot on smart there. As the chief of protocol, and when you're leading your delegation, and I believe this of all people, if you're the CEO of the company, if you're the head of a government, whatever it might be, that you do take responsibility. As we all say, the buck stops here. And so I had a couple of oopsie doodles, but one in particular that was very visible and could have caused my president some pretty deep problems. We were at the UN General Assembly, and this is the gathering of leaders that occurs in New York City every year. Regrettably, it will not be occurring this year, as we're all meeting virtually. There will be a virtual convening, but not certainly in person. But and at this one, at the UN General Assembly, we would go, oh my goodness, every time they convened, the president and the secretary, they had so many meetings back to back to back to back. We had just a chock full schedule. Well, at this particular one, he had also layered on a convening of an ASEAN summit. And so at that summit, then we had to put together basically a very complicated mini summit. And I'm explaining all of this not to diminish what had happened, but certainly just to offer some background and color as to why we may have made the decisions we made. So because we were so incredibly busy with so many of these activities and putting everything together, the team had delegated their responsibilities for putting up the flags to another member of what they call the advance team. And so this person very generously offered and executed putting up the flags. Now, in Office of Protocol, we know how to do, we are very good at this. And one of the rules that we had is 6 eyes on everything. So we have 3 sets rather of eyes. So 3 people are reviewing things. And in the end, the review of the flags, the last review should have been mine. So I accepted complete responsibility for this. So the leaders had gone out, they were on stage, sitting right in front of each of their flags, and all of a sudden, in a flurry, someone who I know quite well, who works my team, never gets flustered, ever, ever, ever. She was very flustered. She came up to me and she said, Capricia, we have a huge problem. I said, oh my goodness, well, what is the problem? And she said, the flag of the Philippines has been hung inappropriately. I said, oh my goodness, we need to fix that. We need to fix that. And she said, well, that's not the only piece. The manner that it has been hung, it indicates that the Philippines is at war. I said, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And so the team is rushing to go and fix the error, Meanwhile, I see the ambassador of the Philippines coming my way with members of the National Security Council, and I knew what I had to do. Immediately make an apology to the ambassador, both in person and then for the press, because this now was spinning up in the press, in the media. And what I also was unaware of, that I was told, was that the president was planning on having a pull-aside with the president of the Philippines, because he had a special discussion. He had a private discussion that he wanted to have with with President Aquino. So again, putting the president in a very, very bad position. But because we acted fast, and I think because I accepted complete responsibility for this immediately, they could not have been nicer. The ambassador, the president was just wonderful in forgiving us. But then I had one last person to apologize to, and certainly that was one of the hardest ones to make, was to President Obama. And so I went to go see him, stood before him, and told him that I was deeply sorry for the error. And he looked down at me. You know, he's very, very tall, and even though I had on some high heels, I still wasn't tall enough. He looked down at me, and I looked up at him, and he said, "So this won't happen again, right, Capricia?" And I said, "No, sir, it will never happen again." And that never did. Flag protocol all the way thereafter.
Flags can certainly cause a great deal of angst, and I really think it's amazing and so true that when people see a flag, it's more than just a flag. It's a symbol of their country. And we have a flag room at City Hall, and the first thing that a visitor does, they walk into the room and they look for their flag. And if it's not there, they immediately ask us why their flag isn't there. And we have it that all of the flags at City Hall in Dallas are gifts from the country. So we can say, well, we don't have your flag. We need to have it be presented as a gift. But it's a very emotional. People fight wars for their flag. They die for their flag. And so to people in protocol, it is so very critical. And so we have a few questions that I'd like to weave in. And it fits with a question that I would like to ask as well. We're entering a time when we're going to have some changes, perhaps at the Senate, at different levels of our government. Titles are always very tricky to me, and I'm not sure I've ever really gotten what I would consider to be a definitive answer to how people retain titles, who retains a title, and it leads into a question by Paul Pass. And is there an established book that we can all go to that has all of this written down? I know we have it in different sources, but was there one book that you referred to, and in that, can you give us some guidance on titles?
Sure. You know Robert Hickey, and he has, I mean, actually, I think his website is the best, and so I go to him, and I will refer to his guidelines. Mary Mel French also took. She was a predecessor of mine. She took a great deal of time in writing a book on how to address and titles, in particularly. And you point out, I think one of the toughest ones is when do you refer to someone with their former title, and when don't you? You know, it is interesting. I'm always honored when people still refer to me as Ambassador Marshall, and I, as a political appointee, I actually lose the title of ambassador. I retain the honorable. And so it's interesting. But most people, once ambassador, they maintain and retain ambassador forever. Former presidents, also quite difficult. You should not refer to a president by president, because there is only one president. You can refer to that president as former president, but also the honorable. So it would be the Honorable Barack Obama. So it is tricky, but those are a couple of the resources that I go to assist me in navigating that. In addition, what's really kind of tricky as well is precedence order. And if you're having any type of convening with members of the military and the government, current and former, super tough. Why? Because it never stays the same. Each administration can make their slight variations on who's first, second, third, fourth in line, all the way down the entire precedence order. I like to say that I was always kind of excited that when we were in country, the chief of protocol was number 17. It was a good number to have.
And another question that Paul asks us as well is, and I almost feel like Taiwan and China keep protocol officers in business. I know that there have been some times that there's a lot of conflict with raising the flag for the Taiwanese government. How did you handle that? How did you handle the tricky relations between the Chinese and the Taiwanese? Do you have any helpful hints for those of us out here?
Well, you know, I never had an issue that was specific with those two countries. We did have an engagement whereby they were both in attendance for a convening that occurred in Hawaii, but there weren't any real big hiccups that occurred throughout that visit. I find, I mean, and it's certainly not just the Taiwanese and the Chinese. I mean, we have these conflicts of countries that just don't get along around the entire world, right? And so it is, but we still have diplomatic relations with them. We still need to have that bilateral experience with each of them. We can't adopt their problems with one another. So I always found that having those discussions up front, this is how this event is going to take place, this is the manner in which we are going to engage, and so that you can iron out if they have a problem, or you certainly don't want anything to be presented on the spot. You know, as soon as the event or the discussion, whatever it might be, is taking place, you don't want that issue raised at that moment. You want to iron out any problems well in advance. And so that's what I tried to adhere to, was having these discussions, knowing full well that there's going to be a little friction between two countries, that they have their own personal geopolitical issues, but that we are not going to adopt, and being able to work those through well in advance.
Capricia, I think you make an excellent point, and it really fits into the title of your book, Protocol and Diplomacy, and How to Make It Work for You. And really addressing problems or potential problems up front is a great technique for people to employ, and also asking people, you know, how do you want to be referred to? How do you pronounce your name? How do you want to be referred to? I think that's just some excellent takeaways for everyone in the audience. And we have a few more questions, and everyone feel free to ask your questions now. We have a little bit of time left, and I'll try to get to every one of the questions here, but I have so many because I just read through the book and just wanted to download your experience into my mind. And something that I was fascinated with was what you call culinary diplomacy. And I know that food and foodies and people, their passion for international cuisines has become very, very popular. And I was wondering if you could maybe share a story. I think it involves maybe a noodles about culinary diplomacy and how you handled trickiness related to that as well.
Sure. So there, I was, again, a wonderful, just soft power tool, food in particular. Everyone takes pride in the food of their countries, and being able to highlight it, to use it as a diplomatic tool, you know, so that you are showing respect to the person who is seated across from you, but also you want them to get a little flavor of your country, of your people, the culture. And so food does that in just so many ways. And we launched this wonderful program, as you point out, the Culinary Partnerships, and it's a culinary initiative. And we brought in so many chefs from around the world to assist us in that effort. But the event that you're referring to, these rituals, they're so very important. These cultural rituals are so important. And I was quite lucky that President Obama understood the importance of these. This was on the first trip that we took to China at the request by President Hu Jintao. It was a state visit, and on the first evening, we often have these gatherings that are a little more private. This was held at the Diaotai, which is the Chinese Camp David, if you will, and in this beautiful villa, Villa 18. And all the staff is crammed into the back room, and we're all having a little bit of jet lag, trying to get over that. But at this one moment, my counterpart walked over to me quite excited, and he said, oh, Pastor Marshall, President Hu has a very special request for President Obama. I said, yes. And he says, he would like for him to make a noodle. And I said, I'm so sorry. And he explained to me what he meant by that and how they would go about doing it. And I thought long and hard about it, not long, but for a moment, but hard about it. I discussed it with the staff that was standing around me, and they said, well, if you think it's important, you need to tell him. And so I walked over to the president, whispered in his ear, Mr. President, President Hu would like to make a noodle with you. And he looked up at me, kind of with this look like, what? And I would get to know that look really well over the years. But he didn't say a word. He valued my advice and certainly knew that if I was coming to him in this moment, that it was important. It was important to President Hu. And so he clapped his hands, stood up, and he said, okay, let's make a noodle. And the chef handed him and President Hu this little wad of, you have this wonderful picture up, but it started off as just this small wad of dough. And they bounced and bounced and bounced this until it started to create these long threads, this long noodle, as you see there. And what it was representative of, what they were saying was that this is representative of our relationship. Our relationship will be long in time. And that was important. This cultural ritual was so important to hold that symbolism as this relationship was just getting off the ground between these two leaders. In addition to that, you had everyone joining from the table. You had no longer Americans on one side of the table and Chinese on the other. You had them standing next to one another, shoulder to shoulder with one another, creating this bonds of friendship and this new relationship. It was really important in the end.
That's a beautiful story, and I hope we will soon be able to have some culinary diplomacy soon. And that brings me to some questions that are being asked about protocol in the COVID-19 times. And I know that there have been issues with presidents in the past, either bowing too much or maybe shaking hands inappropriately, or, all kinds of images that sent out into the media. And I was just wondering if you had any tips for us on how to handle people that maybe want to shake hands and we don't want to shake their hand because of COVID rules and regulations, or people that stand too close. I know probably kissing the European way is going to be out for a little bit of time. Any guidance you can give us in the New World Order?
Sure. People are in a time of confusion, and all of the rules of our social codes of conduct have sort of gone to the wayside, and we are unsure. We're unsure of how to engage, if we should be engaging, and you still want to adhere to being respectful, to being civil, to being kind. Because when we get together with one another, we certainly want to have those moments of kindness, of bonding. And that's what a handshake does, right? I mean, it just creates that immediate moment between two people of welcoming, of civility. And without it, now we wonder, how do we manage that moment. You know, we more than likely I'm wearing a mask, and so my expression is muffled or is covered, my voice is muffled. All of these changes in the way that we are engaging. So I have been advising people, first off, know the rules and regulations of where you live. Secondarily, approach every engagement again with the same intentionality of kindness and respectfulness and civility. And I also believe in fail to plan to fail. So set every engagement out up front. Before you meet with somebody, make sure that you are informative of that you say, oh, this will be, I'm looking forward to seeing you, but I will be wearing a mask. And I prefer to use the namaste greeting, because we can adopt other cultures and greetings of other cultures and use those to our advantage. As you noted, I have a son and he just returned to university. And he said, Mom, everybody wants to fist bump and people want to high five. And I said, well, immediately, I said, start something. Say to everybody, let's use the namaste. Maybe that's a good way to just put those hands together and just under your chin so that you can greet folks in a very different way. Maybe you'll start a trend there. But letting people know how you feel and how you're going to approach it, it sort of settles the groundwork. It's the surprise or the unsuredness, that awkward moment that you want to try to avoid. And I will tell you that I have found now when I've had to go out and when I am engaging with people, by letting them know exactly what I'm going to do and how we're going to do it, they just kind of sigh relief.
I think we should all start the Namaste movement. Everyone on this Zoom call, I think we can start a trend. A power to the group here. We can do it for us. And that brings me your comments about just really the empathy, really understanding who you're dealing with, I think is so critical, not only in protocol, but just in everyday life. And I was wondering if you could comment on the role of empathy, humility, and really soft power in changing negotiations, moving the world to a better place.
There are several ways, several tools that I talk about in the book, and those there are those that are physical, like how you set the room up. There are the ways in which you communicate and how you communicate. And then there are, I find, some of the most powerful tools. It's the mindset of diplomacy. How do you set that interaction in advance by putting someone in the right mindset or assisting someone else to get into the right mindset? Most people believe that leadership qualities, what someone should be displaying is this fierceness of strength and decisiveness, when some of the stronger tools that you can have in changing a moment, in moving someone's opinion, is by implementing empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of the other so they feel what I'm going through. They understand that this is a difficult decision, or they understand that I'm a bit more risk averse in this time of this pandemic, and perhaps I don't feel as comfortable meeting or standing too close. Whatever the exchange might be, in putting yourself into that other person's position can just change that exchange. It can leapfrog a relationship. And I watched this happen again and again with Presidents Clinton and Obama. President Clinton in particular, I was very honored to be the last person to leave the White House when the Clintons left at the end of their administration. And in the grand foyer, after I had loaded up the motorcade with the vice presidents and the first ladies, it was now time for the president and the President-elect George Bush, to board the motorcade. And they had called for their jackets and their coats were being put on. And you could tell that President Bush was, feeling you know, like, wow, this is a really big moment. And of course it is a very, very big moment. You're about to take on this mantle of leadership. And as he put his coat on, President Clinton grabbed him by the shoulders, sort of adjusted his coat, tapped him on the back, and he said, let's go do this. And there was just this flash of understanding, compassion, empathy that went between the two of them. And also the beautiful moment of transition that takes place in our beautiful country, you know, peaceful, without anyone raising a voice in anger or opposition. It was just a wonderful, wonderful moment that occurred. And I caught the look of President-elect Bush, his eye, he signaled back to President Clinton, don't worry, I got this. The country's gonna be okay. And it was phenomenal. And it was all the mindset that took place at that moment. And it will stay with me. The looks in both of their eyes will stay with me forever.
And we're kind of getting towards the end of the hour, and we have quite a few questions. So I'm gonna just maybe throw out a couple of them. And the protocol around languages and using different languages, that's from Karen Yates in Austin. And she has spent her whole life teaching people English and other languages, owned a language school. And so I know language is so important, but we as Americans maybe only know one language. How do you handle that? And what are some recommendations you can give us regarding the protocol of languages?
Well, communication tools, so very important. And the precision of language is actually so important. So translation, I turn to phenomenal translators to assist me in helping me navigate when I was in a country that, in most countries, because the only other language that I speak is Spanish. I wish I spoke more. I always said that I wanted that superpower, the superpower of language, being able to speak as many that I possibly could. But being able to look to an interpreter to assist in those moments. And right now we're kind of fortunate. There are several really good apps that are out there that can assist. Well, I know when I traveled to China last year, I depended upon an app to assist me in navigating the language barrier. So there are quite a few of those. There is Interprify now for events, and particularly these virtual events. So we're able to have discussions with people around the world and set up an immediate translation bridge using great interpreters through Interprify. But I agree that language is really important, and I'm hopeful that we will promote the fact that we as Americans need to learn a few more languages and teaching those to our students in the younger years when it's easier to learn a language.
Exactly. And Interprify, I had never heard of that. That's I wrote that down. And let me just give you the final word on this. In this new world that we're living in, do you have some just techniques that we can all employ? Social networking is so very important, and you devote an entire chapter on it. And just give us some positive ideas on how, even with virtual worlds and all that we're going through, how can we stay connected to each other? Because that really and truly is the essence of protocol, of diplomacy, and everything that we've talked about during this wonderful hour.
Oh, well, yes. And I see Jim has joined us again, so I'll be quick here, but you know, again, to really sort of blanket the entire book and the experience is, you know, how can you use these new tools that are at your disposal to convey a civil, welcoming, and respectful engagement. And so just watching your language, the type of language that you are using, always weigh your engagement against the response of someone else, making sure that you're clear in your conveyance. For virtual events, I have been advising people, do your homework. Know who you're going to be meeting with before you turn that camera on. Also, look at your background. Make sure that it doesn't convey a message that you don't want conveyed inappropriately. You have a fabulous one there, Beth. And, you know, so that it all will add up. All of that, all of those nuances, the micro details, and I think that Jim mentioned this in his introduction, are so very important because in the end, they really truly can have a major impact.
Capricia,
Well, I just think this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. I can see why your book got such a rave review in the Washington Post, and I have not yet had the chance to read it, but 2 or 3 of our staff have, and they've all been saying this is the best book they've read, and I know it'll be truly one that will remain on people's shelves. Continued good health to both of you. Again, thank you so much for listening, for watching, and you can go to interabangbooks.com right now to purchase a copy of Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy. You're right. Namaste.